The population is in the verge of extinction.
It's just a ticking time bomb.
So when you're poisoning actual animal, you might not know that you are poisoning the entire nation.
Vultures perform the most important role in the Mara Serengeti ecosystem. In fact, more important than all the other animals combined, because they recycle 70% of all the nutrients, of all the dead ungulates that die in the Mara Serengeti ecosystem. They're responsible for disposing of them, recycling their nutrients. They provide vital ecosystem services, and they have tremendous tourism value as well. They certainly help to prevent the spread of diseases. So you can imagine, without vultures, you would have a suite of diseases that would affect not only the wild ungulate population, other wildlife, but also livestock and even humans. We're at the Mara River Bridge. This is a very important bridge because it connects the Maasai Mara National Reserve with the Mara Conservancy, with two different management regimes. This is one of the premier wildlife destination in Africa. Every year between July and September, you get 1.5 million wildebeest that come from the Tanzania side of Serengeti, and they concentrate here in the Maasai Mara. What you see over here are maybe hundreds of dead wildebeest. Now these wildebeest die from natural causes. They die from the long journey they have when they come from the Serengeti. Others die of predation, others die of sickness. And what we have is an abundance of biomass. And one of the most important keystone species for the Maasai Mara, the whole Mara Serengeti ecosystem, are vultures. In fact, they play such an important role. They account for more than 70% of all the disposal of these ungulates, and therefore a very important role. Most importantly, they keep the environment clean. But because we have lost 70% of our vultures in the East African region over the last 3 decades, you will still see a lot of these wildebeest carcasses that are rotting. They could spread diseases not only to other wildlife, they could spread diseases to livestock, they could spread diseases to human populations as well, and it's just a ticking time bomb. Because of growing human populations, pastoral communities also have large herds of livestock, and predators and livestock have come, they've locked horns, primarily because the nomadic lifestyle of pastoral communities has been curtailed because of changes in land use, but also as protected areas start to shrink and animals that leave protected areas find it very difficult to get their food and hunt, and so it's very easy to take a cow or a goat. And usually when this happens, livestock owners are not compensated. And when this happens, obviously they get very upset and they would like to take the law into their own hands. So they will poison the dead animal in the hope of killing the predator. But in essence, you get hundreds of vultures that come to feed on this poisoned carcass and they all die. If you take the cumulative effect of all that over the whole East African region, that has caused a massive decline in vulture populations.
Wakati mimi nimesha grow up hapa, sababu nilizaliwa hapa, vultures ilikuwa mingi mpaka hata mnyama akikufia nje ya Manyata, vultures wanajaa huko, mpaka hata saa ingine hata uone jua, saa ile jua iko juu, wanakafa hiyo jua. Vultures, they are very important on this ecosystem because most of them they actually eat diseases. Sa ile mnyama labda amekufa kwa ajili ya kama anthrax, hakuna mnyama mwingine anaweza kula anthrax, ni vulture tu ndiye anaweza clean hiyo mali hiyo mnyama imekufia. Wamasai walikuwa wanapenda hii mandege sana, lakini sababu simba wanakuja kwa Manyata naua ng'ombe ama mbuzi, sasa wanajaribu kuwekea hawa sumu ndio kufe, lakini hakuwa na haja na vultures. Hiyo tu wanyama kama mbili, simba na fisi. Hiyo sumu mahali wametoa ni sio Kenya, ni kama Tanzania, inatoka kwa njia ya Tanzania, sio hapa kwetu Kenya.
Ninaona wanyama hii ndeke anakula nyama. Naona nyumba 4 sijui napotea 4 ngine saa hii haionekani kabisa. Kwa sisi wa Maasai napenda hiyo ndeke asafisha inchi kama ngunu nakufa ama ng'ombe nakufa kwa kiangazi, hiyo ndio nakuja kumaliza. Kwa hivyo sasa hiyo kitu ameanza kitambo, na hata sasa hiyo sumu iko ingine mbaya na iko ingine afadhali. Hata siku hizi ndio mimi naona afadhali, kwa sababu sisi wenyewe ameona hiki kitu iko na faida, na ukija kuona hiki kitu iko na faida, saa hii wanyama wameshafanya nini? Imekusha, kwa sababu amewekea.
Yet another dead vulture. We're in the Maasai Mara, and cars went by and they told us, we've seen a vulture on the road. It's been there for 2 days. It's emitting all sorts of things from its mouth, and it must be dead by now. And nobody has had the gumption to make a call or just report this bird. It could have been saved. But this repelled vulture has been poisoned. You can see it's got trauma over here. Second-year bird. And, you know, lying over here, it could cause secondary poisoning. So whoever feeds on this is going to die.
It's very interesting because their attitudes, Maasai favor vultures and they favor their conservation. But the activities like poisoning, which has been talked about nationally and internationally, is a big thing that is detrimental to vultures. The biggest challenge is they really do not understand the connection between poisoning a carnivore and how it is detrimental to the ecology of the area. They do not have any problem with vultures, but they do have problems with carnivores, and that's why they poison them, to try and get rid or retaliate as a result of livestock that they lose as a result of depredation. There is quite some tremendous change in terms of how the communities perceive predators at the moment, because if you move outside the Maasai Mara National Reserve, there is about 17 conservancies that surround the National Reserve, and these are all community conservancies. The community members do get a lot of benefit from these conservancies, and it is basically because of tourism, and the tourism is based on wildlife. So there is quite a lot of improvement in terms of how people perceive wildlife in the area, and it's basically because of the income they are getting from the wildlife. With this new survey, what we want to determine is poisoning hotspots. We have a quite very cool approach or technique that we are going to use to determine whether people do poison in that particular locality. But beside doing the interviews or the surveys, we are also putting GSM units or satellite transmitters on 10 birds, and then we determine their movement. So we can be able to correlate what people say in terms of identifying hotspot areas from the interviews and the mortality of these birds.
So here we have a buffalo carcass that was probably killed yesterday evening, probably by lions, and there were a few vultures that came and fed on it. Some may have spent the night over here. So that's why we found this early in the morning. And there are two species of vultures that we see here. There's the rupels, which has got these half-moon scallops on its wings, and then the sort of dull-looking African white-backed vulture. And these are known as gyps vultures. And they're usually the first to arrive at a carcass. And because they don't have the powerful beaks enough to rip the carcass open, they feed on the soft-bodied parts. So they mainly target the eye socket, the eyeballs, the nostrils, the tongue, and all the other soft-bodied parts. And then once the carcass is open, let's say by hyenas or other predators, then they feed on the intestines and the soft-bodied parts. You get the other larger species like the lappet-faced vultures that feed more on the sinews and the muscle and the bones as well. It's really interesting dynamics between the whole vulture guild. All right, so we've just set the trap to catch a few vultures, put transmitters on them. And the idea is to catch a vulture. These are critically endangered vultures, the African whiteback and the rupel's vulture. And the idea is to put a satellite transmitter on these birds to track their movements, to see which areas they go to, how far they forage from the Maasai Mara, and correlate that with work that we're also doing to identify areas that have high risk for poisoning. As you know, poisoning is the main issue that is affecting vulture populations here in East Africa, where we've lost close to 70% of our vulture populations. So the vultures have now come on the carcass, and it's looking quite promising. So we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed.
Based on our efforts, the frequency of poisoning has reduced quite substantially over the last 5 or 6 years. But over the greater landscape, there's still a lot of poisoning that is taking place. Many of these poisoning incidences go unreported. We strongly believe that with the effort we've put in developing local capacity here for people on the ground to understand more about vultures, become vulture biologists and ecologists, but also work with our partners and reaching out to local communities to get them to appreciate vultures and the role that they play, especially in preventing disease, because livestock is a big part of Maasai culture. And if the Maasai people do understand that by saving the vultures, they will also indirectly be saving their livestock, that will be a huge bonus.
The health implications, meaning looking at human health, is that from poisoning of a carcass, which eventually kills all these other animals, including vultures, the person handling this chemical is also at risk of getting contaminated by using that chemical. So if not well handled as well, the person is at high risk of getting also poisoned as he or she is poisoning the carcass. And also looking at it, because this is happening in rangelands outside, like here in the Maasai Mara, if it would rain that night and the rain washes away this pesticide or this chemical which has been used to list in the carcass, that can eventually reach to our waterways, which people rely on and livestock rely on, and the cascading effect can affect a larger part of the community and also other wildlife and livestock.
So if I deviate from Kenyan legal process, please pull my ear.
So at the moment, we have done quite a number of trainings here in the Maasai Mara, and mainly to do with training the conservancy managers and also government officers under the Kenya Wildlife Service. We have trained them on how to respond to poisoning incidences.
One of the important things that we've been involved in is developing a series of rapid response strategies. So we have a team of people, and we go at the grassroots level, and we train first responders on how to respond when there is a poisoning incident. So for example, if there's a poisoned cow that's outside a very remote area, you have people who have the tools that can go out there, decontaminate the site, collect the forensics that can be used for prosecution, but most importantly ensure that the other vultures that are flying around the area do not succumb to the poisoning over there. So with this strategy spread over time across many different areas, we hope that it'll create a deterrent for people not to poison, and ensure that the judiciaries and the county governments are involved so that they can prosecute those people who are poisoning. And also to make sure that wildlife poisoning is really a crime that can get somebody up to 20 years in jail or 2 million shillings. And it's important for people to understand that it is a crime, and it will be treated as a crime.
Mpaka tushikane mikono, tuangalie kama tutaambia watu wasiwekee sumu. Hiyo tu ndio tunayafanya. Ndio watu waelewe ya kwamba hii mandege ni mzuri, wanakula hiyo sumu, wanakula hiyo ugonjwa, na hiyo tu ndio tunayafanya.
The sentinel of your skies. For centuries I was revered, for I am vital of all species on this planet. Use your power to change. Use your power to act.
Here we have an adult repels. Just caught it.
A big part of our work is trapping these birds, collecting the blood that's necessary to sex them, taking measurements to check their body condition, take their weight. But most importantly is to put these satellite transmitters on these birds so that they can give us their position every hour or so we can track their movements. And how we do this is we find a carcass. We have a specific trap that's specifically for vultures. You have to have a permit, of course, in order to do this. Not anybody is allowed to catch vultures. And then when we trap a vulture, so we hold it, you have to make sure it's really calm. And the process takes about 15 minutes. We attach a transmitter on its back. It's a backpack. It's got a weak link. And this link eventually, after it frays, it breaks and the entire backpack falls off. So it's not a unit that stays on the bird forever and then the bird is free. So one can eventually recover the unit, get it refurbished, and then use it on another vulture. Sometimes it seems like a traumatic experience for the vultures, but actually the vultures don't suffer a great deal of stress. The whole process takes about 15 to 20 minutes. And it's really painless. And then we let the bird go. We monitor the bird's movements, at least for the whole day. We see whether it's okay. We follow it around. And then the bird basically sends you a text message on your phone to tell you where it is. And we track its movements over time. One of the biggest challenges we have with vultures is they travel vast distances. And a big part of our research is trying to understand how far these birds travel. So over the last 5 or 6 years, what we've been involved in is, with a team of people working on vultures, is we've been putting satellite transmitters on these birds to track their movements. So for example, one of my colleagues, Dr. Corinne Kendall, she put 16 transmitters on 16 different birds in 2010. And within the first 9 months, we had 5 birds that died of poisoning. That gives you an average annual mortality of 33%, which is just not sustainable. Vultures have been around for a very, very long time. The earliest fossil records go back about 25 million years. We have the African white-backed vulture, we have the Ruppel's vulture, the hooded vulture, and the white-headed vulture. These 4 species are listed as critically endangered, which means without any conservation intervention, they're going to go extinct. And they're listed as critically endangered because their populations have rapidly declined over the last 3 decades by as much as 70%. It'd be really hard to imagine a world without vultures. Yeah, they're pretty special.